I quit buying rooting hormone. And the first time I said that out loud, I got the kind of look you give a neighbor who just announced they're fixing the roof with duct tape. It happened on a Tuesday morning, standing in the garden aisle with my cart half full and my shoulders already tired. A tiny bottle of rooting gel, barely bigger than a cough syrup, was sitting there for the price of a decent lunch. And I thought, I'm retired. I'm not paying $20 to make a twig grow roots. So I didn't. I went home, opened the pantry, and grabbed a bag of lentils. That's the part people laugh at. My next-door neighbor, Donna, actually chuckled when she saw the jar on my counter. You making soup or starting a science project? Neither, I told her. I'm making plants. Here's the big bet I made by the end of 2 weeks. I wanted a tray of new plants, real rooted cuttings without buying a single store product. And I wanted one clean number to settle the argument how many cuttings lived and what it cost me per plant. If you've ever stood over a cutting like it's a hospital patient misting, worrying, checking for rot, tell me where you're watching from and what you're trying to propagate. A fig, rosemary, roses you don't want to lose. I read every comment like a neighbor reads the mail. Now I'm not new to gardening. I'm just old enough to respect my back and my budget. I've done the fancy powders, the special gels, the humidity domes that fog up like a car windshield. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And the worst part wasn't the failure, it was not knowing why. That week, I had two things pressing on me: the cost of everything going up, and the quiet fear that if I couldn't multiply what I already had, I'd be stuck buying plants forever. Donna called my lentil jar hippie gardening. I let her. Because the strange part didn't happen on day 1. It happened right around day 3, when the lentils did something that looked small but changed everything. By the 3rd day, those lentils sprouted tiny white tails, little commas curling out from the seed. That's when I told Donna, this is the timer. She raised an eyebrow. A timer for what? For the plant's own growth signal. Here's the simple version without the lab coat talk. When a seed wakes up, it has one job before anything else make roots fast. To do that, it ramps up a hormone family gardeners run into, whether we like it or not. Auxins. Think of auxin like a traffic cop for growth. Too much in one place and you get stretching and bending. Remove it from the top of a plant and side branches wake up. Put it at the base of a cutting and the plant gets the message: turn these cells into root-making cells. Scientists have been studying this for over a century, starting with early work on how seedlings bend toward light. The growth signal idea that later became hormone research. But you and I don't need the history lesson to get the benefit. We just need the practical truth: auxins help a cutting decide to root. And here's what most gardeners miss: cuttings don't usually fail because they didn't get enough hormone. They fail because they rot first. The cut end is an open wound. Warm, wet, and still perfect for fungus. So I wrote my plan on a sticky note and stuck it on the fridge. Make a mild auxin-rich soak from sprouted lentils. Add a simple anti-rot edge because survival comes before rooting. Test it against my old habit: plain water and wishful thinking. Donna wandered over later that afternoon. So you're telling me lentils are stronger than the stuff in the store? I didn't say stronger. I said something that made her lean in. A 2025 open access study tested a lentil-based bio-rooter on Italian zucchini and measured big jumps in things gardeners actually care about: roots, plant size, and flower production. Donna crossed her arms. Okay, but does it work on real cuttings? That was the question. Rosemary. Figure A rows I didn't want to lose. And that's where the 5-minute setup comes in, because once you see how simple it is, you'll understand why so many folks never bother. I'm going to tell you exactly what I did in my kitchen, because if you can make coffee, you can make this. What you need: nothing fancy. About 100 grams of dried lentils, roughly 1/2 cup. A jar or bowl. Water. A cloth or paper towel. A blender. A strainer or cheesecloth. Step 1. Soak overnight works. I poured the lentils into a jar and covered them with about 400 milliliters of water. Call it 1.5 to 2 cups. Then I left them 8 to 12 hours. Overnight is easiest. Step 2. Drain, save that water. Next morning I drained them but kept the soak water. That liquid already has useful compounds in it. Step 3. Keep them damp, not flooded. I covered the jar with cloth so air could move, then set it on the counter, out of direct sun. Twice a day I poured a splash of the saved water over the lentils and drained right away. The goal is damp, not swimming. Step 4. Wait for the whitetails. Usually 2 to 4 days at room temperature, you'll see those tiny white root tips. That's the sweet spot when the seed is leaning hard into root building mode. Now, here's the part that's basically 5 minutes. Step 5. Blend. I tossed the sprouted lentils into the blender. Then I added the reserved soak water plus about 1 more cup of fresh water. Blend until it's smooth, really smooth. You're breaking cells open so more of that growth signal gets into the water. Step 6. Strain. I strained it through cloth and squeezed the pulp. What dripped out looked like cloudy tea. That's your concentrate. Donna walked in, right, then sniffed the air and said, "It smells like beans." Yeah, I said, "Not perfume, but it's not a problem if you use it right. This is where most people mess up, and it's a big deal. Never use it straight. Auxins are weird. At low levels, they help. Too strong, they can slow rooting or damage tissue. So I wrote the golden rule on the jar with masking tape. Dilute 1 part concentrate to 10 parts water. Donna laughed. So it's like lemonade. Exactly, I said. Too much syrup ruins the drink. And then I told her the part I didn't learn until I lost cuttings years ago. The hormone isn't the whole story. Rot is. So I added one tiny old school upgrade. If you've ever pulled a cutting and found the base black and mushy, you already know the villain fungus and bacteria moving in before roots show up. That's why I added a simple layer of protection, not because it's magical, but because it's practical. I used a pinch of cinnamon in the diluted solution. Cinnamon isn't a rooting hormone. It's just a common kitchen antifungal that can help keep the cut end from turning into a science experiment. Some folks use a small spoon of honey for the same reason more as a gentle barrier, an antimicrobial helper than a root booster. If you try honey, keep it modest. Sticky is fine, gooey is not. And then I set up my proof test, the kind you can do without fancy equipment. Group A cuttings soaked in diluted lentil solution 110 with a pinch of cinnamon. Group B cuttings soaked in plain water. Same plant, same day, same tray, same light. I chose cuttings that actually matter to a backyard gardener. Rosemary semi-woody can be stubborn. Figure often roots well but can rot if kept too wet. A couple of rose cuttings because roses like to humble people. I'm careful about this part, especially for anyone with arthritis or a sensitive back. I used clean snips. I made fresh cuts at an angle. I removed leaves from the lower half so nothing sat in soggy media. And I labeled everything because memory is great until it isn't. Donna watched me stick labels in the tray. You really think this is going to beat the store gel? I didn't promise a miracle, I promised a fair comparison. But I did tell her one more thing that shifted her expression. Store gels are consistent. They often contain a set concentration. Some common gels list around 3,000 parts per million of IBA, a widely used auxin-like rooting ingredient. See, Donna said, that's science. It's consistency, I said. But for home gardening, consistency isn't everything. Survival is. Because here's what no bottle can control the week the weather flips. The day you get distracted. The afternoon the sun hits harder than expected. And right on schedule, my forecast did what forecasts love to do, changed. We got a warm spell that turned my little propagation tray into a pressure test. The kind where you find out if your method is solid. Or just a nice idea. That warm spell hit on day 5, suddenly bright, suddenly dry. The kind of weather that makes a cutting wilt by lunchtime if you're not paying attention. Donna texted me, "How's your lentil potion doing now?" I didn't answer right away because I was standing over the tray watching the leaves on a rose cutting droop like wet paper. That's the moment every gardener knows. Here we go. Either this works, or it doesn't. So I did the boring things that matter. I moved the tray out of harsh afternoon sun. I kept the medium lightly moist, not soaked. I let air move because stagnant humidity is where rot gets comfortable. And I watched for 2 signs that tell you you're on the right track. Sign number 1. The leaves stay firm without new growth. People expect new leaves right away. But early on, a cutting that stays alive looking is winning. It's conserving energy. Sign number 2. The base doesn't turn dark or slimy. If the cut end stays clean, you've bought time. Roots can't form if the tissue collapses. This is where that hormone talk becomes useful in plain English. Auxins don't force roots like a switch. They nudge cells toward rooting if the cutting survives long enough. And remember that 2025 zucchini study I mentioned? The researchers didn't just see taller plants. They recorded big increases in root length and growth compared to plain water, plus a noticeable rise in flower production numbers like 166% higher plant height and 165% higher root length in their strongest treatment compared to control with female flowers, up 177%. Now zucchini isn't a rosemary cutting. But the principle is the same. Strong roots change everything. Donna came over on day 7 and said, "So what's the catch?" The catch, I told her, is that you can overdo it. Stronger isn't always better. That's why the 110 dilution matters. It keeps you in the helpful zone instead of the harmful zone. Then I gave her a second method because not everyone keeps lentils around and not everyone wants to blend beans in their kitchen. I said, if you've got a willow tree anywhere near you, you've got the old school version. Donna blinked. Willow, like the tree I said. And it has a bonus your store bottle doesn't. Willow is famous among old gardeners for one reason: it wants to live. You can stick fresh willow into damp ground and it often roots like it's offended you doubted it. And there's a practical reason for that. Willow tissues contain compounds tied to rooting, and they also contain natural chemistry related to plant defense. Here's why that matters for us. A cutting doesn't just need the grow root signal. It needs help staying healthy at the wound site. That's where willow tea earns its reputation. My simple willow water method. Find young willow shoots first-year growth is best, usually greener or yellowish bark. Cut 10 to 15 pieces about 12 to 18 inches long. Chop or crush into 1-inch chunks, more surface area helps. Put them in a bucket or large jar. Pour very hot water over them near boiling is fine. Let it steep overnight, at least 12 hours. Strain out the twigs. The water turns a light tea color. That's what you use. Now I'm careful how I talk about this because I don't want it to sound like folklore. Even botanical garden work has compared natural preparations, including willow and lentil-based solutions, against synthetic rooting treatments for difficult cuttings, measuring real outcomes like rooting success. Donna said, okay, so which is better, lentils or willow? I told her the honest answer depends on what you have access to and what you're rooting. Soft, easy stuff, mint, basil, tomatoes, often roots in plain water anyway. Semi-hardwood, rosemary, lavender, roses is where a boost can really help. Hardwood tree cuttings can be stubborn no matter what. You sometimes need precise commercial products, or you need patience and the right season. Then I leaned in and gave her the secret weapon version because it's the kind of thing that makes a gardener's brain light up. Use willow water as the liquid when you blend your sprouted lentils. You get a mix of rooting support chemistry from 2 natural sources, plus that extra stay healthy edge willow is known for. No store product does that, Donna asked. Not in one bottle, I said. And certainly not for the price of pantry food. That's when she finally stopped teasing and said, all right, show me the number. Fair? Because by this point, I had roots starting to whisper at the bottom of the tray, just little pale bumps. The first sign a cutting is changing its mind from survive to grow. And when that happens, you don't want to ruin it by pulling everything up like a kid checking cookies every 2 minutes. So I set a date, 2 weeks. That's when we'd count what lived. Day 10 is the dangerous day. Not because nothing is happening, but because you want to mess with it. You want to tug. You want to just check. And that's how you snap off the first tiny roots and set the clock back. So instead of pulling, I watched for a quieter sign, new leaf firmness, and slight resistance when I gently nudged the cutting. If it grips the medium a bit, roots are doing something. Donna came by on day 12 with iced tea and that skeptical smile she saves for miracle cures. Still alive. Mostly, I said. And that's the point. Here's the lesson I wish someone told me years ago. Propagation is less about making roots and more about managing stress. Too wet rot. Too dry wilt. Too hot tissue collapses. Too much hormone growth gets weird or stalls. That's also why the simplest store-bought versus homemade argument misses the real advantage of the homemade methods. You're not just chasing a chemical. You're building a system. My system had 4 pillars. A gentle oxen-rich soak lentils diluted 110. Anti-rot help airflow plus a pinch of cinnamon. Clean cuts and less leaf mass. Patience without interference. Then on day 14, I did what Donna had been waiting for. I counted. I'm going to say this like a neighbor, not a salesman. Results vary. Some cuttings are fussy. Some plants root like weeds. But here's what happened in my tray. The fig cuttings did the best, most stayed firm, and several showed clear roots. The rosemary was slower, but the lentil-treated group had more hold and less rot than plain water. The rose cuttings mixed as always. Roses have a personality. Donna pointed at the tray and said, so what's the number? I gave her 2 numbers because that's what matters when you're living on a budget. 1 cost per batch. A half cup of lentils is usually under $1 in most grocery stores. That makes enough concentrate for dozens of cuttings once diluted. 2. Cost avoided. A common rooting gel can run roughly $15 to $20 for a small bottle, and some list standardized concentrations like 3,000 parts per million of active rooting ingredient. Donna stared at the tray a second longer and said something I didn't expect. So you're not just saving money, you're multiplying your garden. Yes, that's the heart of it, especially for folks like us who want steady food and less dependence. Because when you can turn 1 rosemary plant into 5 or 1 fig into a row, you stop gardening like a shopper and start gardening like a homesteader. But before anyone runs to the pantry and blends lentils, there are a few mistakes that can wreck the whole thing. Let's keep this safe and frustration-free, especially for anyone who doesn't want extra mess, extra lifting, or extra heartbreak. Mistake number 1. Using it undiluted. This is the big one. Don't go strong. Stick to 1 part, concentrate 10 parts water. Oxen responses can flip, helpful at low levels, harmful at high levels. Mistake number 2. Letting it ferment on the counter. This is a living plant mash. It can spoil. I kept the concentrate in a sealed jar in the fridge and treated it like something perishable because it is. Many gardeners aim to use it within about 2 weeks, give or take depending on cleanliness and fridge temp. Mistake number 3. Soaking cuttings too long. A soak of about 2 to 8 hours is a common practical window. Longer isn't automatically better. After soaking, plant into a clean, airy medium. Mistake number 4. Drowning the cutting. People hear rooting solution and then keep everything wet. Don't. Damp is fine. Waterlogged is rot city. Mistake number 5, ignoring the plant's wood stage. Soft green tips root easier. Semi-hardwood is slower but often benefits more from a boost. Old hardwood can be stubborn, sometimes you truly need specialty methods or the right season. And here's a small but important safety note for my fellow grandkid and dog households. Keep concentrate and soaking jars out of reach of kids and pets. Wash hands after handling cuttings and solutions. Wear gloves if you've got sensitive skin or cuts. Rinse edible cuttings and greens like you normally would, good kitchen habit. Also, don't dump concentrated solution into storm drains, creeks, or ponds. If you have leftover, either compost it or dilute it heavily and use it on established plants in your own garden beds. Donna nodded at that, so it's not a toy. It's not dangerous like a pesticide, I said, but it's still biology. Respect it. Now, if you're 55 plus and you're thinking, this is still too much fuss for me, I hear you. So let's talk about the easiest ways to use this with less bending, less hauling, and less work. Because self-reliance is only worth it if it fits real life. If your back complains, your hands ache, or your space is small, you can still use this approach without turning your kitchen into a lab. Low-effort, low-space versions. Mason jar sprouting. A small jar on the counter is enough to sprout lentils for a modest batch. No bucket required. 1 cup blender method. You don't need gallons, blend a small amount and strain into a cup. Soak and stick routine. Soak cuttings in the diluted solution in the morning. Plant them after lunch. Container propagation. A shallow tray on a patio works. Just keep it out of harsh afternoon sun. Low-lift propagation targets, high success, high payoff. Herbs you buy once and never again. Basil, mint, oregano, rosemary, semi-hardwood takes patience. Food independence plants that matter. Figs, grapes. Variety matters, pomegranate in warmer zones. Perennials and pollinator helpers. Lavender, salvia, some shrubs again. Semi-hardwood timing helps. And if you live in a neighborhood with rules HOA, folks peeking over fences, here's a quiet trick propagation doesn't have to look messy. A tidy tray labeled tucked behind a chair on the patio can be almost invisible. Donna, of all people, ended up trying it. She didn't start with roses, she started with mint because she likes a sure win. A week later, she knocked on my door with a little pot in her hand. Don't get cocky, she said, but it worked. That's diffusion right there. One neighbor tries it, then another. A few months later, you've got a plant swap table full of cuttings that didn't come from a store. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you something because it changes the advice. What USDA zone are you in, and what's the one plant you wish you could multiply without paying nursery prices? And here's the last anchor for the folks who like receipts. The reason this idea isn't mainstream isn't that it's fake. It's that convenience sells better than kitchen knowledge inside a market for plant growth regulators measured in the billions. Which brings us to the real point of all this. Not lentils, not willow, not bottles. It's independence. One small win today that makes your garden feel less like a bill and more like a quiet kind of freedom. Here's what I learned. Standing at that tray on day 14, counting what lived. Self-reliance isn't one big heroic act. It's a handful of small skills that stack. If you can sprout a lentil, you can multiply plants. If you can multiply plants, you can fill beds without a shopping trip. If you can fill beds without shopping, you can eat a little cleaner, a little cheaper, and with a little more peace. And for those of us in our later chapters, fixed income, careful joints, grandkids running through the yard peace is not a small thing. Donna still buys plants sometimes. I do too. There's nothing wrong with that. But now we buy with a different posture, not dependence, choice. Because the moment you stop believing every solution comes from a bottle, you start noticing how often nature already solved the problem. A sprouting seed is built to make roots. A willow branch is built to survive. And a gardener who pays attention is built to learn. If you try this, keep it simple. Sprout lentils 2 to 4 days. Blend strain. Dilute 110. Soak cuttings 2 to 8 hours. Keep the medium damp area and out of harsh sun. Don't pull early, let roots do their quiet work. And if you have access to willow, consider the willow water option too, especially if rot has been your enemy. Botanical garden work has explored these natural preparations alongside synthetic treatments, and the takeaway for a home gardener is straightforward. Natural methods can be genuinely useful, especially for common backyard propagation. Educational note/disclaimer. This is for general gardening education. Use clean tools, follow label directions for any commercial products you choose, and follow local guidelines for plant collection, especially if you're harvesting willow from public land. Keep solutions away from kids and pets, and don't dispose of concentrates into waterways. Small win today, pick one plant you already own and make 2 more.